the world's most ancient spiritual philosophies and practices born in India approximately 2500 years ago. Today, there are roughly 500 million adherents to Buddhism worldwide, and that is 6 to 7% of the world population. There is something positively special about Buddhism in that it is not a watertight compartment. It does not have that I am right and you are wrong syndrome. Buddhism attracts people across religious divides. In the temples or pagodas of Buddhism, which I have visited in India and in Sri Lanka, I came across people from different religions who don't see Buddhism as a competition to their own faith. In other words, you don't have to be a formal Buddhist in order to benefit from the teachings of Buddhism. So what is Buddhism all about? It is common knowledge that Buddhism is based on the teachings of the Buddha. Abundant information on the life of Buddha and the history of Buddhism is available on the internet, and I will not spend time in regurgitating what is already so easily available. However, just in case you are not aware of the Buddha, his life and the history of Buddhism, let me very briefly summarize as follows. Buddhism, as I said, is based on the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha was born as Gautam Siddhartha in a royal family in Nepal on the foothills of the Himalayas to the north of India. He could have been a king like many others in history, or he could have been a sage like very few in history. He chose to be a sage. Early in life, Prince Siddhartha was disturbed by the sufferings that we living beings have to go through, namely the sufferings of disease, old age and death. As he grew, he found the environment in the royal palace inconducive to deep meditation, inconducive to the search of not so apparent truths about life. So, at the age of 29, Prince Siddhartha left his family and palace to live amidst nature, to know why nature afflicts such unpreventable sufferings on living beings. He wandered from place to place like a mendicant, asking questions to the religious scholars of his time, who were basically Hindu and Jain scholars, and evaluating their answers. He went into deep meditations in forests to find the answer within himself, answer to the question, why is suffering unpreventable in life? Finally, after 6 years of discussions, debates and meditation, enlightenment dawned on the Buddha when he was in deep meditation under a tree which stands even to this day. Here is a glimpse of it. It is a peepal tree, a species of fig unique to the Indian subcontinent and mainland of Southeast Asia. It is known as Bodhi tree and has been confirmed to be more than 2500 years old. It is part of the Mahabodhi temple in Bodh Gaya, the center of global Buddhism. Forest research institutes in India do a health check on this tree periodically, and the latest check was done on 8th April 2015. It confirmed that this more than 2500-year-old tree is in excellent health. It was under this tree that he gained enlightenment, and Gautam Siddhartha was no longer Gautam Siddhartha. He had transformed into the Buddha, the embodiment of wisdom, the embodiment of knowledge. After the Buddha gained enlightenment, he traveled extensively in North India, sharing with people the knowledge that he had gained. He also received royal patronage, which helped propagate his philosophy and his practices rapidly. The Buddha passed away at the age of 80. He did not leave behind his teachings in a written form. Buddhist texts were compiled much later by his followers. After he had passed away, his followers too traveled far and wide to spread his teachings, and they too received royal patronage. In fact, Buddhism spread far outside the Indian subcontinent. It reached up to Afghanistan on the northwest and China in the north. From China, it spread to other parts of Asia, like Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, and all this without the use of force, without war. Conflict, if any, was intellectual. So what was the enlightenment composed of? The enlightenment that dawned on the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. Well, the basic enlightenment was that there are four noble truths. And what are they? The first truth is that suffering is a fact of life. It cannot be avoided. The second noble truth is that suffering is a result of desire. The third noble truth is that suffering can end by the abandonment of all desires. And the fourth noble truth is that desires can be abandoned by following the noble eightfold path. Now, what are the components of this eightfold path? The 8 components. The first component of the eightfold path is right belief. Second, right intent. Third, right speech. Fourth, right behavior. Fifth, right livelihood. Sixth, right effort. Seventh, right contemplation. And eighth, right concentration. So these are the 8 components of the Noble Eightfold Path, which will lead to the abandonment of all desires, which in turn will lead to end of suffering. Okay, these 8 components of the Noble Eightfold Path are basically a reiteration of general human values. I remember memorizing these points in school social studies, and at that age I was content with having memorized them. But at this age I want to know more. I want to delve deeper into Buddhism. And honestly, I have not spent much time, I have not made much effort to understand Buddhism independently. So I felt the need to talk to at least 2 individuals. One, a person not born Buddhist, but who opted for Buddhism, who formally opted for Buddhism. And second, a person born Buddhist and who has dedicated his life to practice and teaching of Buddhism. I was confident of finding both my targets at the international headquarters of Buddhism, which fortunately for me happens to be in India. So I set off on a journey to Bodh Gaya. I am in Bodh Gaya, in the state of Bihar, North India. Bodh Gaya today has all the sights and sounds of an average Indian town. But this was a secluded forest during the Buddha's time, which must have been why he chose this place to meditate in his search for truth, a search for which he had left behind all the pomp and luxury of palace life. This place reminds you of an embassy area or diplomatic area, though not as organized as an official one would be. Bodh Gaya attracts Buddhists from all over the world. and houses Buddhist temples or pagodas run by Buddhist organizations of various countries. I am on my way to the Mahabodhi temple, which is in the precincts of the Bodhi tree under which Gautam Siddhartha gained enlightenment. It did not take me long to find the people matching the profile I was looking for. I am with Mr. Seth from Boston, US. Mr. Seth is on a visit to Bodh Gaya in India, and I happened to bump into him and agreed to talk to me. Mr. Seth, are you a Buddhist?
Yes, I am.
What exactly does it mean to be Buddhist?
For myself, it means to believe in the teachings of the Buddha, to know that we are in a difficult situation here as humans, and that there is a way to freedom from this. And the Buddha kind of gave the way to this freedom. So I would call a Buddhist the belief that the Buddha taught the way towards freedom.
Are you born Buddhist?
No, I was not born Buddhist. My parents were both Jewish, actually.
So what is it that you found in the teachings of the Buddha which you did not find in the religion of your birth?
Well, for me, Buddhism is not a religion. Buddha is not a god. There's no dogma. There's no blind faith. Buddhism is about an exploration of our experiential reality. It's very much more like a science of life, and not so much about a religion.
Would you want to see the whole world Buddhist?
No, it's not necessary.
Why?
Because in every belief system, every faith, in religions also, there's many beautiful qualities, and I think it would be more important that the world stays very diverse, but that each tradition, each culture, each religion learns to cultivate the beautiful qualities in their own, in their own roots, and not everyone jumps into Buddhism.
Do you see anything that you don't agree with or which doesn't gel with you, or something scientifically or historically wrong in the Buddhist scriptures?
Wrong? No, I would not say. But Buddhism, it was passed down orally for many years. And sometimes some facts I believe are off. Also, some of the numbers that they give. I was in Rajgir a couple days ago, and there's supposed to be a time when the Buddha gave a talk there to about 400 or 1,000 monks and nuns. And if you go up there, you see there's place for maybe 50 people to sit. So some of these numbers must be off. And I think, like any story. For instance, the life of the Buddha, it's become kind of like a myth. There's a lot of mythological experiences and a lot of archetypes inside. But I think this is normal for any tradition. But I wouldn't call these something wrong. I wouldn't say that I disagree with these. I think that the essence of Buddhism is very much intact. It's very much still alive, still practiced. It's a living tradition. And I think this is the important part.
So what you are saying is that the essence counts, not the technical details.
Well, I mean, the technical details are a lot of what gives the structure to Buddhism, which are also important. But I believe that the text is still preserved where it counts. I think that there's enough of the Buddhist teachings preserved accurately enough that the path to liberation is still accessible, and that's the point.
Would you like to add something more?
I think it's very important, what the Dalai Lama once mentioned, that there's three aspects to Buddhism. There's one aspect which talks about cultivating good human qualities, And the Dalai Lama said this is true for every religion, things like love and patience and compassion. He said these are available in all religions. This is not, special to Buddhism. And then there's the trainings of the mind. These are also applicable to all people. Also science, especially in Boston where I'm from, there's a lot of scientific research now proving meditation techniques are beneficial for the brain, also in the mind and the functions and the emotional states. And then the third part of Buddhism, this is then the kind of belief side with the Buddha and the story. So I think it's also important to separate this and see that Buddhism has something very important to offer people of every religion, every faith, every person. And this doesn't mean they have to become Buddhists. This simply means that they can benefit from kind of the beneficial human qualities involved in Buddhism. And I think this is a very important aspect to mention.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seth. Thank you very much. So that was my interview with Mr. Seth, a born Jew who opted to formally become a Buddhist. What I liked about his comments was that he acknowledged the beauty in every spiritual philosophy. His comments were remarkably free of the I am right, you are wrong attitude. That's what I liked most. And the second thing I liked is that he is secure about his spiritual philosophy. He is not apologetic or defensive about the fact that knowledge which was transmitted orally over centuries before they were written down on paper, some discrepancies might have crept in, but they are on the periphery. The core is important, and it is the core that matters. I liked that too. So this was my interview with a person who is not born Buddhist but who opted to adopt Buddhism formally. My next meeting is with a person who was born Buddhist and who has dedicated his life to practicing and teaching Buddhism. I am with Venerable Dr. Barasambodhi Thera of the International Meditation Center in Bodh Gaya, India. Dr. Thera, could you please enlighten us on the basic principles of Buddhism?
Buddha never introduced any ism. People introduced the ism. Buddha was totally against of ism, because what the Buddha thought, that is not the similar with popular belief of religion. Most of the religion talk about the God, creator, soul, Atma, etc. But Buddha, he never talk about the God or Atma, and he thought that for the salvation or for the suffering, free from suffering, God's help is not necessary, not important. It depends on people's karma. We have to look what people are doing in their daily life. If they are free from anger, if they are free from delusion, if they are free from greed, lobha, dosa and moha. So it is very helpful for salvation or free from suffering. So Buddha thought that if people holding the greed, anger and delusion and believing in God or believing in so many goddesses and worshipping them, so it is useless. So that is the different from Buddha and the other religious teachers. So Buddha totally depend on the karma, and he encouraged people to follow the path that which is harmless, love, compassion towards all the sentient beings. And then he prescribed the 5 precepts for the moral good conduct, not to killing, not to stealing, not to commit any misconduct of senses, not to steal, not lying, and abstain from intoxicants. When we practice these principles, our moral conduct will be good. And he also advised to practice generosity, whatever we can afford, to help others, and practicing meditation, mind cultivation. So whatever we do, good or bad, everything is created by our mind, not anyone else. So when we practice meditation, we look our inside, whatever happening in our mind. So how much impurities, how much greed, anger and delusion we have, we can make effort to overcome all these impurities. That way we need the practice meditation, and by practicing meditation we can concentrate our mind, and only by concentrate mind we can develop the wisdom, knowledge. So this morality, concentration and wisdom helpful people to overcome all kinds of suffering and free from also all kinds of defilements. That is the teachings of the Buddha.
Dr. Thera, you said that the Buddha did not name his teachings as any ism, but since we are talking about different teachings of different spiritual leaders and identity for the Buddha's teachings, we need a word. So please allow me to continue using the word Buddhism for our purpose. In Buddhism, what is the answer to the disparities of life? Why is one man suffering more, and why is one man enjoying more than the others? Why this differentiation?
You see, Buddha talked about the karma. So we can see in our daily life, some people are enjoying too much wealth, someone is a lack of that, and someone is healthy, someone is sick, someone is beauty, someone is ugly, someone is long life, someone is short life. These are the differentiation we are seeing in the world. So the answer of that in Buddhism is the karma. This life, it is not our first life, and this is also not our last life. So before this we have many previous lives. So whatever karma we did in our previous lives, according to that we are achieved in this life and enjoying in this life. Whatever bad karma we did, so because of that we are suffering in this life. So that's why Buddha always remind us that whatever karma we are doing now, we should do best karma, good karma, and avoid all those bad karma. So in daily life also we can have good result, and future also we can have good result. So that is why we need to practice mindfulness. When we practice mindfulness in our day-to-day life, then we can all kinds of evil avoid. So the karma make the difference, no one else.
Does Buddhism recognize the soul?
So that is the big difference Buddhism and others. Buddha never talk about the soul, but nothing is the Buddha tell that nothing is the permanent. Everything is changing. Everything is changing. Like the soul is eternal. Others saying that souls are eternal. Buddha says everything is changing. This is called anatta. Anatta. It means non-self nature, everything.
Well, now if the soul also is temporary, like everything else, the body is temporary, we know that. If I die now, my body will be burnt or buried. Body won't exist. If I don't have a soul either, then what will reap the reward of my good karma or bad karma? Reward for good karma and punishment for bad karma. What will get it? Who will get it?
You see, whatever karma we do in our daily life, either good or bad, everything has some expectation. So whatever karma we do, if have any expectation, it create the energy power which is called will force. So good karma has good will force, bad karma has the bad will force. That make us the future life, the result, that force follow us. Suppose you can see wave of the ocean. So one wave arising and also falling, disappearing, appearing and disappearing. When it is disappearing, from that force creating another one. So the later wave is not exactly the previous one, but it also not separate from the previous one. Each force making another one. You cannot see it is also the same one, also is not the separate. But it has the some connection. It force make the another one. Similarly, whatever karma we do, good or bad, it has the will force. That force make us another life, and according to that we get our good or bad result. Suppose when you are free from all kinds of expectation, it is the a stage of enlightenment. They have no will force. Therefore, there will be no rebirth and no result at all. And after life, everything is finished. There will be no rebirth.
So can I say that destruction of the will force is the ultimate aim of this birth and death cycle?
Yes. When you have no any will force, then it is the end.
I don't need to be born again.
Yes.
On a different aspect, what is the status that Buddhism accords to women? Is woman considered absolutely equal to man, or are there any differences?
You see, Buddha never did any discrimination, gender discrimination. Buddha looked that if you study the Buddhist history, Buddhist philosophy, Buddha is the one of very important teacher in the world who gave the equal right to the woman as man. In the Buddhist order of the Sangha, Buddha allowed women enter into the Sangha. Before Buddha, it was impossible for women to enter into the religious order. So Buddha started bravely for women entering into the Sangha. So Buddha says that gender is no factor. The factor is the ability. If everyone who has the ability, who can get free from suffering, gender is not any factor.
On a still separate aspect, do you wish that everybody in the world becomes Buddhist?
So, you see, Buddhist, it is not important. Buddha wanted to become a good human being. If good human being, that is the benefit. If someone says Buddhist, if not following the teachings of the Buddha, is useless.
So Buddhism is means to an end. It's not an end in itself. It is a road to a certain goal.
Yes.
It is not the goal. Am I right?
Yes.
In some religions, there are certain errors. Like say, in one religion it is said that the sun moves around the earth. Science has proved that the earth moves around the sun. In some religions, women and men are not given equal status. And so on and so forth, right? In some religions, kind of force is also allowed to spread it, which does not agree with the human consciousness, right? Something like that. Do you find anything like that in Buddhism?
You see, Buddhism never forced anyone to become a Buddhist.
Yeah.
And also, Buddhism started with the wrong belief or wrong belief, wrong faith, or blind faith. So, whatever Buddha taught or whatever Buddha encouraged people to follow, that is very scientific and very relevant till 21st century. And Buddha never asked people to believe his teaching. He asked people to prove it, whether it is fruitful for you or others, or not fruitful. If you think it is not fruitful, you avoid it. No one force you. If you think it is fruitful, then you follow it. Like others say that whatever religious text say, you have to believe. You have no question. But Buddha never encouraged people like that. Buddha wanted to examine it, prove it. If it is profitable, it is benefitable, then you can practice it. It is more scientific.
There is no compulsion in Buddhism. There is no compulsion.
No force, no.
No compulsion. Okay, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so that was my interview with His Holiness. Things have now fallen in place, in my mind at least. The 8 components of the Noble Eightfold Path, which seemed a little hazy earlier in this video, have now taken shape. I'll share with you what shape each component has taken in my mind. So the first component of the Noble Eightfold Path is right belief. Right belief in what? In some God-man? No. Right belief in the Four Noble Truths. That is, suffering is inevitable in life. Suffering is caused by desires. And suffering can end with abandonment of desires. And we can abandon desires by traversing the Eightfold Path. So understanding of the Four Noble Truths is the first step or the first path of the Eightfold Path. The second component of the Noble Eightfold Path is right intent. Intent for what? Intent of what? Intent to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Knowing is not enough. Intellectual knowledge is not enough. The intention to follow the path, the intention to travel on that path is the second component of the Eightfold Path. The third component of the Noble Eightfold Path is right speech. Right speech. And what right speech is, what good speech is again something which we are born, which is built into ourselves. We don't need a God-man to tell us what speech is good and what speech is bad. And why right speech? Well, that is good karma. We heard His Holiness stressing on the concept of karma. Bad speech is bad karma. So it has to be right speech for right karma, for good karma. The fourth element or component of the Noble Eightfold Path is right behavior. Again, that is a contributor to your karma, to your karmic record. The fifth component of the Noble Eightfold Path is right livelihood. Basically what I understand is that it means avoid a livelihood, avoid an occupation or a profession that does not gather good karma for you. The sixth component of the Eightfold Path is right effort. Right effort to avoid bad karma. Everything is focused on karma. So right effort, right speech, right action, right behavior, right effort, all geared towards performing good karma. The seventh component of the Noble Eightfold Path is right contemplation. Contemplation is a function of the mind. As His Holiness Venerable Dr. Barasambodhi Thera, whom I interviewed at Bodh Gaya, used the word mindfulness. So contemplation is mindfulness, concentration on the mind, concentration of the mind. It is the mind that creates desires. And we know that desires are the cause of our suffering. So if we are to have no desires, then we must control our mind. So it is a mindfulness, a contemplation. That is the seventh component of the Eightfold Path. And the eighth component is right concentration. And concentration on what? Obviously, the prior seven components. Right? Concentration on those seven parts, the seven preceding parts, is the eighth path. All the seven paths plus the eighth path together make one path. Path to where? Path to the end of suffering. Path to salvation from suffering. Path to nirvana. And what happens to us when we reach the state of nirvana? That we'll see in a few moments. Now, if you are aware of the fundamentals of Hinduism, you might be wondering in what way is Buddhism different from Hinduism. For starters, and that's a very interesting starter, the most important secondary scripture of Hinduism, Srimad Bhagavatam, names the Buddha as a scheduled incarnation of Lord Vishnu, that is God. The theory is that Hindu society was going astray due to misunderstanding and gross misuse of Vedic rites and rituals, including animal sacrifices. So Lord Vishnu incarnated as the Buddha to stop the misuse of Vedas by denying the Vedas. And when Hindu society was sufficiently corrected by the Buddha and his followers, Lord Shiva incarnated as a sage named Adi Shankaracharya, who restored the Vedas to their correct use. It was a strategy of God, because in Hinduism God likes sport. It's called Leela. However, this theory does not cut much ice with Buddhists, as I found out during my unrecorded chats at Bodh Gaya. Even among the schools of Hinduism, there is no unanimity over this. Some schools say that the Buddha named in the Srimad Bhagavatam is not the Buddha after whom the philosophy of Buddhism is named. Some schools of Hinduism say, no, he is the one. So we shall not get into this grey area. Rather, we'll focus, or I'll focus on objective similarities and differences between the two great philosophies. Buddhism lays as much stress on karma as Hinduism does. Buddhism lays as much stress on the defeat of desires or the overcoming of desires as Hinduism does. Buddhism subscribes to the principle of repeated life and death. So does Hinduism. What Buddhism says is nirvana, return to where we came from, is what is called moksha in Hinduism. Return to where we came from. The crucial difference, as I understood, between Hinduism and Buddhism is the source from which we have come. In Hinduism, we are fragments of an eternal soul, an all-pervading soul. We are fragments of it. Our body will perish, but we, I, or you, the inner self in us will not perish. We are eternal. In Buddhism, it's not so. In Buddhism, there is nothing eternal. According to Buddhism, where have we come from? We have come from material nature. We are a configuration of materials. And our moksha or our nirvana or our salvation is when we again disintegrate into those materials, when we have no desires left. Thus, nirvana in Buddhism means that we cease to exist. We just don't exist. Everything is finished. Whereas in Hinduism, our salvation comes when we return to the eternal spirit, when we merge with the eternal spirit after shedding the material body. So, salvation in Hinduism, or moksha as we say, means that we don't exist in the material world, but we continue to exist in eternity, for eternity. Now this brings us to the title theme of this video, that is there God in Buddhism or not? Contrary to common opinion on Buddhism, the Buddha did not directly say that there is no God. However, as His Holiness, the Venerable Dr. Barasambodhi Thera said, nothing is eternal in Buddhism. But the concept of God is one of an eternal entity. And if nothing is eternal, then we can deduce that there is no God. Because if there is a God, he has to be eternal. Alternatively, since the Buddha did not directly deny the existence of God, let's take it that there is a God. But he has put in place the immutable law of karma, from which nobody is exempt. So it's us and the law of karma. God is not at play, even if he is there. So no purpose is served by worshipping God or appeasing the demigods by Vedic rites, rituals and sacrifices in the hope that they will shower boons on us. There are no such boons in Buddhism. But there are such boons in Hinduism. Boons from heavenly beings to satisfy our material desires and thereby help us overcome our material desires. This is the fundamental difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. And that's a difference I can not only live with, I can celebrate it in tune with that spiritually uplifting chant.